Hey guys, welcome back. It is so nice to see you. So glad to be back with another episode. This week I am testing out this mic, which is super cool. I talk a lot with my hands, so it's very nice to have a mic to hold. We're going to see how it goes. Right now I just feel like a singer holding this mic, so it's super cool. We're going to see how the audio comes out. But welcome guys. Welcome to the Real Thesis podcast. If you are new here, my name is Shalini, and I am a screenwriter, filmmaker, lawyer, and I started this podcast as a way of analyzing stories on screen. I basically wanted to look at how a film uses visual elements to tell a story, to explore themes, to convey emotions, to really dive deep into the story. So I look at both filmmaking elements and the story/screenwriting itself. We have a really great film today. I am very excited to dive into it. It has taken quite a long time to put it together, so I am very excited. So without any further ado, let's dive in. Today, we are talking about the film I Love Boosters. The film literally just dropped last week, and I ended up seeing it. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about it. I never even saw the trailer for it. It was just a rainy day, and I was hanging out with friends, so we decided to go for a movie, and we ended up seeing this film, and we saw it on opening night. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a fantastic film. It is so thoughtful, thought-provoking, entertaining, funny. So I really wanted to cover this film. I Love Boosters was written and directed by Boots Riley, who has previously done Sorry to Bother You and has created the Amazon television show I'm a Virgo. I have not seen either, so I can't speak on it. Boots Riley is also part of the West Coast hip-hop group called The Coup. The film stars Keke Palmer, Taylor Page, Naomi Ackie, Demi Moore, Don Cheadle, Lakeith Stanfield, and Will Poulter, as well as Isa Gonzalez. It's a very stacked cast, lots of people in it. And the film first premiered this year in March at South by Southwest, and it came out in theaters last Thursday. So we very accidentally ended up seeing like the premiere first showing of the film. I'm going to break down the plot. I don't have any trigger warnings for my analysis today. I will say that if you do go see the film, it is rated R for 2 very explicit bedroom scenes, so be warned. It is graphic, but my analysis is pretty safe, so no trigger warnings for my analysis today. So let's dive into the plot. Spoilers up ahead. Our story starts with Corvette, who's played by Keke Palmer, and she is a booster who steals clothes and then sells them on the street for cheaper. Corvette is kind of in just a very difficult time of her life at the moment. She is currently squatting at a Jackie's Chicken restaurant. So she's basically living in a restaurant. The owners can't have it open because there's construction around the street. So she's squatting in there, yet they know she's in there. So they're kind of like threatening her. And on top of that, she has like a lot of mounting debt. And she just feels this very overwhelming sense of loneliness. And in order to kind of work through that, she does fashion designing, and she uses that as a way of connecting with other people. Corvette often executes these stealing clothes adventures with her 2 best friends, Mariah, who's played by Taylor Page, and Sade, who's played by Naomi Ackie. When the story starts, the Velvet Gang has gotten a bit of attention. They've made it to the news, and they've gotten on the radar of Christy Smith, who is played by Demi Moore, and she is the designer of Metro Design, which is the main clothing store that the Velvet Gang targets. Christy Smith is kind of a child prodigy biologist. Like, she comes from scientist parents. She was very, very smart. She got into MIT at like age 12 or something. And then when she was at MIT, she started partying with famous people, started dating a designer, heavily influenced his fashion line. And she dropped out of MIT to basically become a fashion designer. So in the present day, she's a grown-up, she's a billionaire, and she owns all of these Metro Design stores, which the girls steal from. In an effort to help Corvette, basically through this like funk that she's in, Sade takes Corvette to a group meeting called Friends Helping Friends that is run by Dr. Jack. Friends Helping Friends is very much like a pyramid scheme. It is definitely trying to empower people to get other people to join their downline. And it's a bit unclear. I think if they get people to join their downline, then eventually if they make it to the top, and if they get on the larger pyramid, then they eventually can make money. It's pretty unclear, but Sade and other people are really into it, but it's very clear to Corvette that like this is not what she's looking for. One day after a heist, I keep calling them heists, but they're like boots. One day after a stealing adventure that goes horribly wrong, Sade, Mariah, and Corvette, they are going to Decadian Towers in order to drop off this like paper for friends helping friends. They're dropping it off with Dr. Jack, who lives in Decadian Towers. Decadian Towers are this residential high-rise building that leans at like a 30-degree angle. It purposely leans. So they're there at the tower to basically drop off this paper, and they see that Christy Smith's personal barista is about to go in. So Corvette hides in the cart and sneaks into Christy's apartment. Once inside, she overhears Christy talking about these $100,000 suits, and she's like, oh, I have to get my hands on these suits. But she tries to sneak out, and while she's sneaking out, because the floor is like slanted and she's wearing stockings, she can't escape. So Christy catches her. And Christy actually compliments the dress that Corvette is wearing, which is an original design by Corvette. And Corvette tells her that, you know, it's turquoise because I love turquoise. And ever since I was a child, I feel like I have to be surrounded by turquoise to feel safe. And Christy just kind of stops her and is like, this is not story time. And that's actually kind of aquamarine. So Corvette just kind of leaves and, you know, leaves the apartment. Corvette is really determined to get her hands on these $100,000 suits. So she applies to work at Metro Design, hoping that there's a back room or some way that she could access these suits. When she's there, she realizes that Christy Smith has stolen a design of hers. It wasn't the dress that she was wearing, but it was a dress that she had submitted to a competition, and she's incredibly upset about it. She does later confess to Mariah and Sade. They're sort of like, you know, if you submitted it to Christy's competition and she stole it, then there's a paper trail. And she confesses, like, I didn't actually end up submitting it because I thought it was too weird, and Christy Smith just probably saw it on Instagram. Nevertheless, Corvette, Sade, and Mariah start working at Metro Design. It's such a weird environment to work at. They literally get like 30-second lunch breaks. They're required to wear the latest designs. The clothes that they have to wear for work are basically taken out of their pay, so they get paid nothing. It's just a very bad work environment. So they are just like, you know, we don't want to continue with this. And they decide to basically just rob the store on a Thursday. So they come into work on a Thursday, and the manager, Grayson, hosts a meeting in the fitting room, even though the store is open. And when they go back out, they see the entire store has been robbed and there's no clothes left. So the girls hack into the security footage, and they see that there is this one girl who basically came in and sucked all of the clothes into her garment bag and left. So they track this girl down, and they find Jean Yu, who is played by Poppy Liu. Around this time, Christy sees a footage of the girls breaking into one of the stores, and she recognizes the dress that Corvette is wearing. So she kind of puts together that this woman who is in her apartment is part of the Velvet Gang who is stealing from her stores. But back to Jean Yu. Jean Yu is a factory worker from China, and she teleported that day. Basically, she has been working in the factory her whole life, as well as all of her family. They work very long hours for very little pay, and it's incredibly grueling work. One day, Jean Yu and her cousin Li Pan, they discovered that the administration for the factory has basically they took a teleporter from the Chinese government, and they have been teleporting shipments to America to avoid shipping costs. Basically, it's just terrible working conditions. The workers are expected to sandblast denim, and her aunt gets sick and dies from lung disease. And then her mother gets sick. And when her mother gets sick, she's kind of just very afraid of what's going to happen. So her and Li Pan basically make a plan to steal the teleporter and teleport to America, steal all of the clothes, and hold them for ransom to demand better working conditions. The girls are basically like, you can't possibly do this alone. Let's do this together. You take, 70% of the clothes to hold for ransom, and we'll take 30% to steal. So they team up and they start robbing stores together. They have a pretty successful running spree. They have a good stick going where the four of them go and rob stores. They're able to take a ton of clothes. And one day, before they're robbing one of the stores, they are ambushed by one of their coworker at Metro Design, who is Lily, played by Isa Gonzalez. And she was like, you're kind of getting a little too much under radar. You need to watch out. And she tells them that what they have isn't a teleporter. It is actually three things in one. It is a teleporter, it is a situational accelerator, and it is a deconstruction machine. So it has 3 different settings that they can use. The girls realize that if they deconstruct the clothes, it also undoes some of the labor efforts that was put into the clothes. And they realize this because Jean-Yu has a cut on her hand. So they deconstruct some of the Metro design clothes and the cut on her hand goes away. And they realize that the effects of the labor are also reversed. But this isn't a time machine. She kind of gets into dialectical materialism and explains that it's not necessarily a time machine, it's just altering particles and the efforts that go into it. But basically, they have a very powerful machine on their hands. Up until this point, Lily has been very gradually just increasing her efforts into organizing for better working conditions for the sales associates. She just started with her and her coworker, and then she just kind of got everybody in the store, or tried to, with Sade, Mariah, and Corvette. And at this point, she's kind of sort of organized across a few stores. So she tries to coordinate with the girls. She's organizing a sit-in to basically demand a longer lunch hour. And she's like, well, while we do this, you guys can rob the stores. Like, let's coordinate efforts. And the girls are like, at this point, we already have too many goals on the plate, so we're not going to be a part of this. But the girls go to rob the stores the next day, and every single store is on serious lockdown. And their entire plan is thwarted. They can't steal any more clothes. At this point, Sade kind of wants to pivot, and she kind of just wants to be like, you know what? Like, let's just sell what we have. Like, we're doing okay. But Corvette is just really intent on sticking it to Christy Smith. Basically, Christy goes on TV and very publicly taunts Corvette. She knows who Corvette is. She knows that she's part of the Velvet Gang. So she gives a tour of her like Palo Alto house and shows how it's all aquamarine. So she publicly taunts Corvette, and Corvette is like, okay, we need to do something. We need to make her feel it. So the girls go to the fashion show. At the fashion show, the entire audience is made of all the sales associates from the store. And so Lily is there, and Lily is handing out flyers, basically trying to convince the other sales associates to like protest together so they can demand better working conditions. The fashion show starts, and the girls start deconstructing the clothes in front of everybody. They go behind stage and they deconstruct the clothes, and then they're trying to escape. And as they're escaping, they hear people behind a door talking about the $100,000 suits. So they break in and they discover a group of people who call themselves Forged Democracy Think Tank. Basically, everybody in the Forged Democracy Think Tank are people that have been on the news in different capacities. They are community members in different ways that have just been talking about things happening in life. They're just people who are out in the community, and Dr. Jack is one of them as well. So they're like, they confess that they're wearing the $100,000 suits. So the girls are like, well, take them off. So the think tank starts to undress, and they continue to undress their skin. And it turns out that their skin is the $100,000 suits. At this point, the girls are like, all right, we have, Sade and Corvette are fighting. Corvette wants to destroy them, but Sade is like, we can make so much money off this. Like, we have to take these. So they decide to take them. Sade, Corvette go one way. Mariah and Jean-Yu go the other way. And basically, Sade and Corvette are in a huge car chase. They end up crashing, and there's only one suit that's left. So Corvette gives it to Sade, and she's like, you escape. I'm going to distract them. So the Forged Democracy Think Tank is chasing the girls throughout the streets, and Corvette basically distracts them. She has the teleporter with her. So she's sort of using the teleporter to jump back and forth, actually from China to Oakland, in order to evade the people. Now, the fashion show was being live streamed at the factory in China. And so the clothes were starting to get deconstructed on screen, and the factory workers realize something amazing is going on. So Li Pan comes and basically confesses to everybody that him and Jean-Yu are the ones who are behind all of this, and he says that he's going to take the teleporter and run. While he's confessing this, the security officers start chasing him, and so he's running through the factory, evading the security people, and Corvette is teleporting into the factory with him, and they're having to run, and then she'll teleport back to Oakland and run for the bodies and then teleport back. So she's pretty back and forth, but there's a lot of things happening. At one point, she gets to the factory, and she's almost caught, but all of the factory workers unite to kind of get the security workers off of her, and she's able to jump back to Oakland. And she shakes off the Forged Democracy think tank, and she makes it back to the fashion show. Once there, she runs into Mariah and Jean Yu, who basically, after they split up, they stumbled upon a warehouse full of Metro design clothes. And Jean Yu basically deconstructed a whole warehouse of clothes, and then they were chased back to the fashion show. And so at the fashion show, Lily has done a pretty good job of getting people to protest, but it's still like a third of the crowd. It's not everybody. And at this point, Corvette realizes that everybody is fighting for the same cause, and they have to work together. So she teleports back to China. She hits the situational accelerator, increases the protest that is happening in China, and teleports that energy back to America. And what happens is a huge united protest demanding better working conditions for everybody. And at this point, Christy Smith has to accept defeat. She confronts Corvette and she was like, I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was, if I took from people, I took and I made it my own. And Corvette says, yeah, that's what we have done as well. And she says to Corvette, you're fighting a losing battle. You're just fighting yourself. And Corvette says, well, that's how I know I can win. And the film ends with, we find out that Sade was able to sell the $100,000 suit. The girls are doing well. This huge mounting debt that has been chasing Corvette throughout the film has become small, and she's able to handle it. And the girls are happy, and they're together. And that's the end of the film. I really hope I covered everything. There's so much in the film, so I hope I covered all the main points that I wanted to cover. I really love this film because I think it can be consumed on multiple levels. On one hand, it's just it's not so absurdist. It takes place in a world that's very close to our own. So it's based in reality, but it has enough hints of absurdism that you can have fun with the film. You can get lost in the plot. You can get lost in the fact that teleporting is just normal. The fashion is wacky and cool, but still very sensible. The makeup and the hair is just amazing. It's just a very fun and enjoyable film, and I love it. At the same time, the film has very deep things that it's saying about the world today. And it has a very strong stance. It has very strong ideas, and it's using the fashion industry kind of as a lens through which to analyze these larger economic themes. So of course, because this is the Real Thesis podcast, we are going to analyze the deeper things that the film is saying. So diving in, I Love Boosters is a film about how capitalism is eroding democracy. And if we continue on this path, we will lose our rights, our individualities, our democratic power, very slowly in a way that we may not even notice. But lucky for us, it's not too late, and there's something to do about it. It's a very complicated thesis, and so I'm going to be looking at it. So we're kind of going to parse through the film and really look at it, mostly how it applies to fashion, but we're going to break this down into parts and kind of look at it, how the film kind of addresses this idea of capitalism just being being bad for democracy. We're going to look at the way that idea plays out in several different ways throughout the film, mostly through the fashion industry, but in other ways as well. So the film takes place in Oakland. I've been to Oakland, and I'm not personally intimately familiar with Oakland, but I remember a friend of mine lived there, and I asked them what they thought about it, and they were like, it's beautiful, but it's sometimes a difficult place because you have very extreme wealth from Silicon Valley, basically right up against extreme poverty. So there is a major economic disparity that creates a lot of tension. I don't know if that's true today. I don't know how it is. I think that economic disparity is something that we have seen in a lot of cities in a post-COVID era. I think that disparity has grown a lot with all the recessions and stuff that's been going on. But we definitely see this in the film. On one hand, you have Christy Smith, who is a billionaire. She has a Palo Alto house. She lives in these towers that are literally leaning. And I thought it was just expressionism. I didn't think it was actually leaning, but it is. It's leaning. And it's almost as if she has to purposely introduce adversity into her life in order to challenge herself. It's like she's trying not to get stuck in a routine. So she has to intentionally introduce adversity to challenge herself and be innovative as a creator. it's very ridiculous and it's inconvenient for everybody else, but she doesn't seem to mind that she lives in a tower that's at like a 30-degree angle lean. On the other hand, when the film starts, we have Corvette, who is squatting at a Jackie's Chicken. She is literally living in a restaurant. When the film starts, Mariah, I think, has started to just crash with her. So the girls have to like basically makeshift a shower and shower in the kitchen. And she has a note that slipped on the door from the Jackie Chicken owners who are like, I know you're in there. So like these girls don't have their base needs met. Like they're struggling just to have a decent shower and a roof over their head. And there's also another element of the fact that like she is someone who's struggling financially. And then you have Jackie's Chicken, which is a Chinese chicken place. And it at least I think it is. I always assumed it is. I thought they mentioned at one point, or it's in the decor, but it's this idea that like when you're at the bottom or when you're struggling or when you're of a certain class economically, that there's a fight for resources. Like these people want their restaurant back from her, but for her, that's her house. Like there's not enough for everybody to go around. And you get that idea with the fact that they're both fighting over at Jackie's Chicken. It is definitely my personal opinion that I don't think people resort to crime as a first resort. I think it takes a lot to get people to do crime, and I think it takes being in a very desperate situation. And we see in some ways, you know, the girls work at the store and they hardly make any money. So when they do make money, it's not enough. They can work multiple jobs and still not make ends meet. And I'm not entirely sure that they have a job. Like they do have other jobs. There's a chance that Sade and Mariah do have other jobs. And then there's also a chance that Corvette makes money by selling her designs. None of it is clear, but basically, like, those two throwaway lines of, like, just get a job and calling them low-class urban bitches, like, it kind of highlights what I'm talking about with this disparity in this world, in which you have people who are resorting to these very extreme circumstances just to make ends meet, and then you have people who are completely insulated from this situation, and they do not comprehend why anybody would do this, or they don't understand the situation at all. And so they judge from really a place of not knowing or understanding or having empathy about why somebody would be resorting to doing this. I guess diving further a little bit into like the context of the film, early on in the film, Sade takes Corvette to this group meeting for friends helping friends. And at first she kind of is like, you should go see Dr. Jack, like he'll help you. They kind of liken Dr. Jack to a therapist, and Corvette's like, no, I'm not going to go see him. It's not going to help. And then it turns out that he's basically like just running a pyramid scheme. So they liken him to a therapist, but he's not. He's basically just running a pyramid scheme. And it's a very interesting point. Like I think obviously they could have just introduced the pyramid scheme, but it's a very intentional point that they liken him to a therapist. And I think Boots Riley is making this point that like, you know, we think that therapy is a thing that could help people, but in reality, like therapy is not something that would help Corvette in this situation. Like it could help her with like the larger feelings of loneliness. It can help her with these like existential things that she's experiencing. And perhaps Sade, you know, proposed it to help her with those issues. But the truth is that when you feel like you need imminent help, you're not going to go talk to somebody about it. Like you have to do something more active about it. So I find the friends helping friends to be very interesting because it is a pyramid scheme, and it introduces this concept of a pyramid, which plays a very key part in the film, and I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit later. But it does introduce this idea that like people are looking to help themselves. Like people are not just sitting back and doing nothing about their situation. Like they are actively trying to do things about it. And therapy is not always a viable option for people because sometimes their problems are much more immediate, much more imminent, much more dire, that just getting psychological help may not help them. And at the same time, like people do want to help. And in this situation, it just doesn't help Corvette. But people are desperate to do something about it. And I think it was just a very interesting point because it paints this picture of like, these aren't burnout girls that are fine just stealing clothes and they're kicking back and enjoying life. Like they're trying very desperately to get out of their economic situation and to have a little bit more stability. And stealing clothes is the way that they know how to do it. So Riley does a great job of like translating this very niche world and this very niche profession to an audience that may not understand, or an audience that basically can look at these people and judge them for what they do. And he's really trying to show us, like, these girls are doing this because they feel like this is what they have to do. It's, they feel very like they have to take these drastic measures, and they've gotten to this point, and that's when we are meeting them in this story. We're going to move on to the fashion in the film. And I think this film is extremely brilliant because it looks at many different aspects of the fashion industry, and it touches on this theme of how capitalism and really can affect democratic powers and democratic values. So I would like to start with the experience of shopping. When the film starts, the first time that we meet Sade and, Corvette and Sade are talking, they're in the middle of stealing clothes. And they have, it's the two of them. They have a white friend and they have two guys with them. And they're basically created, the two guys start to fight. They create a distraction. Their white friend starts to elevate the situation. And that creates enough of a distraction to, for the two girls who've stolen all the clothes to basically run out and escape. It's a very funny scene. And basically their white friend, her mom gets sick, so she's not able to help out again. So then they're just left with the three black girls. And there's a very funny scene in which Mariah's like, well, I can't pretend to be white, but I can pretend to be light-skinned. And so she does that in a very hilarious way. Basically, she holds her breath, and the way she holds her breath, and she can appear to be more of a light-skinned, obviously mixed race woman, come off as higher class, kind of as she is. In the film, when she holds her breath, she basically bends down, holds her breath, and then she pops up, and she's Robin Thede, who's obviously this light-skinned actress. So it is hilarious because she can't hold her breath for that long, but every time she's able to hold it and pop up, she's Robin Thede. So it's just very funny. So the girls do try to do a heist where Mariah's holding her breath, and she's trying desperately to keep on this front as a light-skinned person, and the other girls are supposed to be stealing the clothes while she is creating distraction. It goes awry, and they end up having to break into the store by shattering the glass in the front window and taking the clothes from the outside. It goes terribly awry, but it really touches on this idea that the experience of shopping is not accessible to everybody. They very much feel like they need a white girl with them because they're just so conspicuous. When they go into a store, they are followed, they are looked at. It just seems like they don't belong in the store. It's not even about being white or black. So there's definitely black people who shop at the store, but they very obviously don't seem like people who would shop at the store. So the experience of shopping becomes this thing that the accessibility is limited to people who fit within a certain look, who fit within a certain class. And we see that enforced through the sales associates, but it's just very interesting that we see this layer of you have to look a certain way, you have to behave a certain way, you have to seem like you have a certain kind of background in order to be accepted as a shopper here. And, a white person provides the appropriate distraction because, they can take the sales associate's attention, they can freak out if people are fighting. They had use for that, but they themselves can't just seem like they're shopping in the store because they don't seem like people who could. And all of this just kind of creates this idea of almost being a homogenous society in which if you want to be a part of the circle, if you want to be someone who shops here, if you want to be able to walk into these stores and have accessibility, you have to kind of get in line and look a certain way and at least pretend you have this kind of background. It's sort of one way in which access to the capitalism or wanting to take advantage of the capitalistic system or wanting to shop, you sort of have to give up some of who you are in order to be a part of that. And it's not giving up all of your democratic power. Obviously, you can shop there if you want, but it's just a very interesting thing that they're very much barred. They can't just shop. They didn't even steal anything when they were trying to shop. They were being conspicuous, but they hadn't stolen anything yet. And they were just being very much followed and harassed by the sales associates. And it very much is this accessibility is limited and you kind of have to fall in line and you have to kind of behave a certain way in order to have access to these things. Okay, next I'm going to move on to this idea of appropriating. And it's pretty complex. So I'm going to look at it. I'm going to kind of like warm up and look at it through several lenses. Christy Smith has this way of changing the narrative to basically benefit her. So for instance, she keeps saying that boosters cut into her profit margins. She says in a documentary, and the girls hear it when they're watching the documentary, and they're like, no, we're not cutting into your profit margins. Like, your clothes are just too expensive, so people aren't buying it right now. And her assistant kind of confirms that. Her assistant tells her, she's like, actually, they're really not cutting into the margins. But Christy Smith always kind of spins the narrative in this way. When the girls are watching the documentary, that's when they learn that basically, like, everybody suspected that Christy was seeing this fashion designer when she was at MIT. And of course, it was probably very illegal because she was only 15. But when his next fashion line came out, it was all lab coat inspired. So they were very much like, ooh, Christy like inspired this line. Like, this is inspired, this is inspired or created because you were hanging out with Christy. And in the documentary, Christy was like, I designed all of it. Like, it was all my idea. And we don't know if that's true. We really don't know if that's true because, again, she has this thing of like spinning narratives to favor her. Now, I want to talk about the incident with the turquoise and the aquamarine because to me, this is kind of like the most insidious form of the appropriating. But just to recap what happens, Corvette has snuck into Christy's apartment. She overhears about the $100,000 suits. She sneaks out of the coffee cart while Christy's in the other room, and she's trying to escape, but she's slipping on the floor in her stocking. She's not able to get out. Christy sees her, and she says that she's actually the barista's manager. She tells Christy she's a fan. Christy compliments her dress, and she's like, oh, it's actually my design, and I love turquoise. Like, I have to just be surrounded by turquoise all the time. It just makes me feel safe. And we start to get a flashback of her in her parents' car, and it was all turquoise. And Christy just interrupts her, and she was like, this is not story time, and it's actually aquamarine. I feel like it's even hard to explain how this is appropriating, but to me, this was such an emotional scene because the one thing we know about Corvette is that she loves turquoise. Like, she has turquoise always somewhere in her outfit. Like, it's in her clothes, or it'll be in her hair, or it's her makeup. Like, there's not a single scene that she doesn't have turquoise. She has to sit in this turquoise chair. Like, she just loves turquoise, and it really does make her feel safe and happy. So for Christy to tell her that it's not turquoise, it's aquamarine, it's almost like she's taking this thing that is so intimately associated with Corvette her whole life, and she is filtering it through this lens and diminishing it into something and taking it from her and almost changing its meaning and saying that it's aquamarine. And I really struggled to kind of talk about why this was emotional, but it just kind of hit me in an emotional way. And I don't even know if I could say it, but if you were able to speak on this, I would love to hear people's thoughts on this. But to me, it very much was like, I likened it to like someone telling you at age like 27 that you've been pronouncing your name wrong your whole life. Like, it's taking something that is so intimate to you and reducing it to something else and almost reducing it to such a small version of itself, and almost taking away the meaning it has to you. And it was just such an emotional scene, and it kind of fits a lot more squarely within this thing of appropriating, but I'm putting all of these things under the umbrella appropriating because it all leads to this behavior that Christy has, which is taking things, spinning stories, taking narratives, taking credit, taking people's emotional attachment to things and changing it through her lens and changing it into ways that fit her and favor her or the way she sees it without any regard for anybody else. We're going to move on to talking more about the fashion industry aspects. And I want to start with the experience of the workers. So we have the Chinese factory workers. They work extremely long hours. They get paid very, very little, and they are forced to sandblast denim. The sandblasting denim is giving them scoliosis, and it is killing them. This is a very real thing. If you take anything from this analysis, and if you take anything from this film, please take that we should not buy sandblasting denim. It is a very harmful practice. This is like what happens in the film is very, very true. Like sandblasting denim. And sandblasting is when you create like a faded effect on jeans. Sandblasting denims and purposely like scratching denim, it just introduces the toxic chemicals into the lungs of the people that are doing this. And it does cause lung disease. A lot of people do die from it. There are fashion houses that do it a lot more ethically. There are better ways to do it, but I am just telling you guys, like, please, if you do anything, like, please do not buy sandblasted denim or purposely irritated denim. Like, these things are very, very toxic to people, or at least try and do your research and find sources that do it more ethically. But I say all this because these workers have the worst situation. Like, they really do attempt, before they resort to stealing clothes, they really do attempt to, like, demand better rights, and they're just completely ignored. Christy is like, no, they should just keep working the way they are. So they have really horrible working condition. And I mentioned the pyramid earlier, and I'm not talking about a pyramid scheme. I'm very much talking about a pyramid. And I really see these workers kind of at the base of the pyramid because they really create the foundation of this entire operation. Like, they're the ones making the clothes. Without them, there would not be clothes to make, but they're also the ones who have the worst working conditions. They are the ones who are struggling the most. They are the ones who are dying from this. So they are really at the bottom of the pyramid. Next up, we have the sales associates. They have, compared to the factory workers, they have much better working conditions, but it's still crappy. They get 30-second lunch breaks. It's literally 30 seconds while the manager gets an hour. The clothes that they are required to wear for work are deducted from their paychecks. Their paychecks are about $38 to $40. So Lily really tries to organize. She really tries to demand for better working conditions because they're so unfair. And they go, like, at first she just tries to get her and the other associate to talk to Grayson. And he's blasting the music and there's nobody in the store. And they're like, can you turn the music down? He's like, I can't. Like, I have to keep up the aesthetic of the store, even though nobody is in there. And they finally get him to turn him down, and they ask him like why their paychecks are so low. And he explains it through all this complicated like legalese and corporate jargon. And Lily, because she's very smart, she's able to understand what he's saying, but not everybody does. So these poor workers are basically mistreated. They get very low pay. They have to abide by these rules. And like the company keeps putting the aesthetic of the company and the company's rights over them. Like, they are not valued and they are not protected by the company. The company still protects their brand, their aesthetic, their clothes, their own, now I'm just talking like a lawyer, but their own like liability over the workers. The workers really mean nothing to them. So in the pyramid, I do put them above the Chinese factory workers because they are in much better working conditions compared to that, but they're also treated really horribly. And of course, the managers are probably a step above that. Like, they get an hour lunch break is probably slightly better, but they also really don't matter in the bigger picture too. Okay, let's talk about the actual designs. So the girls have a pop-up, and it's a very popular pop-up where they're able to sell the clothes, and the community is just very happy and excited to have clothes that are well made. Cheaper clothes fall apart, they shrink in the wash, they get holes in it a lot more easily. So these clothes are well made, but they're too expensive to buy at the store. And I don't know if the community knows that they're being boosted, but like the community basically is appreciative to have nice clothes at an affordable cost. There's another instance too where there's these two girls shopping in the store and they're like, ooh, Christy Smith knows what the streets want. And this is when Corvette is working in the store, and it's a gut punch when you hear it, because at this point we know that Christy Smith steals designs from designers who know what the streets want. This is a real thing. Stores, especially like Temu and Shein, they steal from small designers. They take these ideas and they mass produce it. They produce it for cheap. And it's just it erodes the ability of these small designers to be able to do anything about it, because their designs are taken off Instagram and they're put out there in the world. They are produced at a scale that an individual designer cannot produce. It erodes their business. It erodes their clientele. Like, it's very underhanded business. And it goes back to what I was saying about Christy Smith appropriating things. She very much is taking these designs, and like, she herself is completely removed from society. She herself may not know what people want, But she's taking these designs from other people and putting it out there and getting the credit for it when she is not the one who is engaging with these communities and knowing what people would like. Even though Christy is like taking these designs, she says at one point, she was like, my clothes are stolen by boosters and they're being sold on the street and out of trunks of cars, and I don't want my clothes represented that way. And it goes back to what I was saying about gatekeeping and accessibility. She doesn't want her clothes to be accessible to other people. She doesn't want, she wants the people who wear her clothes to be able to afford it. She wants them to belong to probably a certain economic class. Like, she is controlling this and she is expecting people to fall in line, and she doesn't like it. I mean, I understand, like, nobody would want their clothes sold on the streets for cheaper and stolen from them. Like, I'm definitely not condoning stealing. But I guess my point is that it goes back to this thing of like really barring access to people. And in this world, it's clothes, and it is something that is stupid. And that's what I mean by you can watch it and be like, dang, they're barred from access to good clothes, and that sucks. The clothes are representative, and they are a metaphor for more complicated issues that people get barred access to. There are other things that people get barred access to. They just don't have the ability to get to the extent other people do. The gatekeeping is real. The ability to walk through the doors is hindered. Like I said, this film is like a deeper metaphor for other things. And in this, it's the clothes, and they can't get access to good clothes unless it's stolen and sold by boosters. So yeah, it's very interesting. Okay. We have the base of the pyramid, which are the Chinese factory workers. Then we have the sales associates in the store, probably managers on top. If I'm moving up this pyramid, I think the people that I would place next are the Forged Democracy think tank. So I want to really discuss what I call the influencing layer of this pyramid. In every Metro design store, there is a television that is playing the news. On the news, they are constantly interviewing fellow community members who are saying, they just have titles like sad black woman or angry community guy, or like very nondescript titles like that. And I missed what a lot of them were saying, but I did catch what sad black woman was saying, which was, it was something funny. Like, she doesn't want free housing and she doesn't like rent controlled apartments, that if she wants to be able to pay more for rent, she should be allowed to. Again, very absurdist, but the Forged Democracy think tank is basically, we have now left the world of fashion and we are looking at Christy Smith as a billionaire and the power that she has as a billionaire. As a billionaire, she has this power to influence policy. She does it in a way, in the film, again, it's always going to be a wacky way in the film. So in the film, these people have volunteered to have their skin surgically removed so that they can wear skin suits and basically go out in the world and appear as if they are other people. So it seems like a diverse group of people are sharing these thoughts, and they are on the news and they're talking about it, but in reality, it's just the same few people who are just putting on different skin suits and talking. And this is all funded by Christy Smith. She was a biologist. She is a science genius. So she figured out how to do this. And it is her way of influencing policy. It's her way of reaching out into the world and trying to get people to think a certain way. I think it's very emblematic that when we see the members of the Forged Democracy think tank, they're almost always on TV. Dr. Jack is the only person we see out in the community, or whoever has the Dr. Jack suit on is out in the community, but they're in the news and media. And that's completely reflective of what we see today, in the sense that the news and media play a very, very important part influencing policy. It influences how people think. It influences what we see, and not even just like news anchors, like it's fellow people that we see online that probably influence us more than actual politicians. Like, the media has incredible influence. So I think it was very brilliant to have this think tank appear to the public through a news screen or through a television screen or through some kind of media, in order to kind of drive home this point that that is the way that they see policy being implemented out in the community towards people. It's also interesting that it's Forged Democracy think tank, because it's very contradictory. The idea of democracy is that it's egalitarian and that it's coming from the people and that it's coming basically from the people. And then when you put forged in front of it, Forged Democracy, it's this idea of it coming from the top down. which is what we see, is kind of making people from the top down think a certain way, behave a certain way, kind of become more like-minded. And I said being a more homogenous society, like it is this trickle-down effect that we are seeing through the Forged Democracy think tank and other means in the film of like getting people to kind of be like-minded, be a certain way, fall in line, act a certain way. It's very powerful, and it is easy to fall in that. And, to be honest, it's very much like all of these things have direct parallels in our own worlds. Like we're being affected in these kinds of ways. We're sort of being like corralled in these ways, and it's so insidious, and it's so, it's done in a way that we hardly notice, but is just kind of getting very organically integrated into society. And things are just changing, and people are changing, and we probably are moving towards like more like-mindedness and thinking certain ways. And the film is holding a mirror to that and basically saying, yeah, this is what's happening. And it's coming from the people at top. It's coming from Christy Smith, who is a billionaire. We have now wound our way all the way to the top, and we are at Christy Smith. Christy Smith does not see or respect the humanity in other people. So the first time that the factory workers try and demand better working conditions, they say that, it's Metro design policy that the designers get to make that call, and she is the only designer. And she's like, it is easier for me to let them make the clothes than it is for me to make the clothes. They have to make the clothes. Again, more like random, meaningless words. And then also when they hold the clothes ransom and Lee Pan sends the ransom video, she doubles down and she increases production. She doesn't see the humanity people. She doesn't see their needs or their wants. Like, they're just replaceable beings to her. As a fashion designer, she's also always talking about people as art. She's talking about decorating them. She's talking about them being like part of her creation or part of her like just art. And at one point, her assistant says to her towards the end of the film, she's like, I don't think people want to be the art. They want to be the artist. But Chrissy doesn't see things that way because she doesn't recognize that other people can be complicated beings with individuality and individual taste. She kind of just sees everybody around her as people that she can influence and control. She calls the Velvet Gang low-class bitches, and then later the Fusilierian bitches, which are just both very like derogatory and reductive for who they are. She sits on top of this pyramid, and she's so truly unaware of the effect that she has on all the people around her. Like, she is so far removed from what is happening in the factory at China, and she can be told that people are dying from doing this, and it wouldn't affect her. Like, she truly sits at the top, and she makes these decisions, and every single decision that she makes trickles down, and everybody has to work really hard and hustle to make it happen. And they feel the effects, and they bear the burden. And she sees herself as this visionary and as this person who forges ahead and whose job it is to keep pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits. And she doesn't care what the cost is because she is not the person who is bearing that cost, and she never has to be. It's everybody else who is underneath her that has to bear that cost. More things about Christy. She has this really interesting statement where she says that she's really creating true democracy. She says this at her fashion show, and she's like, I'm creating true democracy. If I was going to tell every person in Oakland to wear fuchsia, they would wear fuchsia. That is like democratic power. And it's funny that she puts it that way because it's like, that's not democratic power. That is forged democracy. Like, that is you telling people what to think. But that is her concept. Like, she doesn't understand. Like, she thinks that, like, she understands her place at the top of this pyramid. And it doesn't have to be any different for her because it's not been different. She doesn't have to feel the effects. She is insulated in her position. So she gets to make these decisions, and she thinks that she has this kind of power. She also really, like, going back to, like, her not seeing the humanity, like, she really, fucks with Corvette. So basically they know when the Velvet Gang hits because there's always a Red Hustler's candy wrapper on the floor, and Corvette spits the Red Hustler's candy. I think she spits it at the sensors. So I don't think she intentionally means it as her MO, but they always know when the Velvet Gang has hit a store because they find the candy wrapper on the floor. So when basically when Christy Smith sees the security footage and she sees Corvette stealing fur coats from her store from the outside, they bang one of the display cases from the outside, steal fur coats. She recognizes the turquoise dress. And so she was like, oh, this lady was, she's not a barista manager. She is part of the Velvet Gang. And she remembers seeing the Red Hustlers candy on her lips. So as an FU to Corvette, she buys the candy and she buys the whole candy company and takes the Red Hustlers out of distribution. And she's like, oh, I just want young women to be healthier. But it's like an absurd move to do just to like stick it to Corvette. She also introduces the camera crew to her Palo Alto mansion, which is turquoise. The whole mansion is turquoise. Everything, well, it's aquamarine. Everything inside is aquamarine. And she says, I just have to be surrounded by aquamarine because it helps me feel safe. So she sticks it to Corvette in like this is how she taunts her. And this is the thing that makes Corvette want to like deconstruct her clothes at the fashion show. It's her going on the news and basically taking Red Hustlers off the market and then flaunting her aquamarine mansion and saying, I have to be surrounded by aquamarine to feel safe. Like, she is very openly taunting Corvette. She's very mean for it. And it's just such an exorbitant way of doing that. All in all, Christy is so insulated in her wealth. She's so insulated in her life. Like, she has no idea of how the real world works. She has no idea how her decisions have an effect on others. And that is why, at the end of the day, the girls don't try to change Christy's mind. They try to change the mind of all the other workers. And this is where we get to the solution to this really lopsided system that really serves only one person. In the film, we really get to see the power of democracy through Lily. Lily kind of starts off by just, it starts off with her wanting to talk to Grayson along with the other sales associate. She's like, we're better in numbers. It escalates to her wanting to basically demand a better lunch break between the 5 girls that work there. So she tells her associate, and her associate is like, well, are Corvette, Mariah, and Sade in? And Lily's like, she trusts them. She's like, yeah, they'll be cool. They're good. Throughout the film, she eventually kind of organizes this to multiple stores, and it escalates to her being at the fashion show and really trying to get people to protest. Lily understands that one person really cannot have that much of an effect, but there is a really huge effect in everybody using their voice to demand what they need and what they want and what is right for them. She sees the bigger picture in a way that Corvette doesn't, because she understands that people really need to work together and people really need to combine their voices and could join forces, even if what you are asking for differs ever so slightly or it differs a lot. Like, there's still power in voicing your opinions and saying what you need and doing it as a group. And for the whole film, like, Corvette is really the antithesis to Lily, because Lily just has all this faith. She, like I said, she just believes the good in the girls, that they all share the same values. Even when she confronts the girls and tells them about like the different situations on the teleporter, she tells them, she's like, I organized like a lunch sit-in where we're all going to demand like a better lunch break, or basically they're going to like go out for an hour. She's like, let's coordinate. Like, you guys hit the stores while we have this little protest going on. So she's really like, even though they're kind of trying to achieve different things, she's always thinking about ways to work together. And this is so different from Corvette, who talks a lot about loneliness, talks a lot about just not being able to connect with people. And we really see the way that Corvette is very single-minded and is always kind of like shutting people down. Sade is like always helping her, always trying to propose something. And she constantly shuts down Sade. She is always like, Sade, you're always saying this. Like, you always be talking about this. Like, she says always, like, Sade, you always do this. So Sade throws it back in her face at the end. She's like, Corvette, I don't always do anything. Like, I am constantly changing. I am constantly growing as a person and adapting. She's like, you are always putting me in a box, and no wonder you feel alone, because you're not seeing how your best friend is changing. And the one thing I always do is I always have your back. And I thought that was just a very interesting theme in the film. It's basically like, use what Corvette is going through and the sense of loneliness that she has. And her turning point is when she is jumping back and forth between China, and she sees the way that all the factory workers have to come together to help her in Lipan. And that's when she realizes the power in numbers and how they all have to work together, both in China and in Oakland. And it's when she really comes around and like embraces the power of democracy and embraces the power in a lot of voices working together to achieve a greater whole. And I talked a lot about how Christy Smith is very impenetrable. She just doesn't feel the effects of anything. And she sits very isolated on the top of her pyramid. But the truth is, when the entire pyramid is turned on her, that's when she feels the effects. And throughout the film, we see the effects of capitalism. We see the way that money trickles down. We see the way that it leeches from people in order to benefit the person at the top. But the film really shows us that even though money may run in one direction, power runs in both directions. And the people at the bottom, people have the power en masse to basically affect change and to push for change. And they do it in a way that forces Chrissy to notice and to have to contend with her actions and have to contend with the way things are done. And that's why I enjoy the film. It's a very uplifting film. It's a very positive film because it gives us this hope that, like, regardless of the situation, there is something that we can do about it. And we don't have to just go with the flow. And we don't have to just accept things the way they are. And especially, we don't have to just accept the effects that these billionaires are having. Not to get political, but I think as we get deeper into AI, and especially as we see a lot more data centers coming up, that's something that I think is definitely going to affect people among many other things. And the people who feel the brunt of these effects are all at the bottom. They're in very precarious and vulnerable situations. And it may be idealistic, but sometimes you need that kind of idealism to feel empowered to do something. And I like that this film is empowering us, telling us, hey, things might be dire, things might be hard, things might get worse, but there is something that you could do about it. And that's why I like this film. I barely scratched the surface. Honestly, like I said, it's in theaters, and if it was on streaming, I would have watched it 6 times to fully analyze every aspect of it. But I was not about to go pay $20 a viewing to see it. I saw it once, and I didn't even take notes because I was so engrossed in the film. And I had my notebook open, and I turned to my friends, and I was like, I didn't take a single note because I didn't even know what to write. So I went back, and I took a lot of notes. But there's still so much more to unpack. And if you've watched this whole video and you haven't seen it, I do recommend seeing it. I do recommend you hold on to this belief that you have power, your voice matters, and you got to fight for what you need. Stand with others, stand for what you believe is right. And I love that we get this really cool message in a very beautiful and wacky film. And that is our analysis today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And if you want, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at RealThesisPod. If you want to shout us out, send us any messages, you can email us to realthesispod@gmail.com. And it was great hanging out with you guys. And I will see you next time. Bye.